Welcome to The Middle, a podcast about that messy middle in between job loss and the comeback, told by people who've lived it. From CEOs to veterans, athletes to analysts, we talk to folks navigating the unexpected turns in their careers and what comes next when the plan falls apart. These honest conversations will move you, make you think, and maybe even inspire you to leap into something new. Because behind every career pivot is someone just trying to figure it all out. Welcome. You are based out of Atlanta, correct?
No, Atlanta has become the third stop on my life tour, world tour, American tour.
Oh, is there going to be an international version?
Who knows? Who knows? There might be a Caribbean one. There might be a Caribbean one. I born and raised in Chicago, went to school in New York, and lived and worked in New York City. Well, I went to school in upstate New York, went to grad school in upstate New York, and then I lived and worked in New York City proper for a little over a decade, into the 2000s, and I've been here being Atlanta since 2009.
What drew you to Atlanta?
I was married when I came here to Atlanta, and my kids, one was in high school and one was in elementary school, and I've been here as long as I have at this point because I wanted to see my youngest through the college, and she's now going to be a sophomore. So who knows?
So I wanted to start us off. You know, you've written a lot. You've written on LinkedIn about this intersection of identity and work. So when you have found yourself in between these transitions, whether it's professional or just moving, how have you separated like who you are and who you were from what you do and where you're going?
So the more and more I move through time, I will say compartmentalizing is becoming more and more difficult. I think across the board, right? I think that your representative does a good job at work, if you will, until problems arise. And then if you are not who you really are, the representative falls away, and then who you are shows up. And then coworkers, HR, everybody else is looking at you like there's a problem, right? So I think what I have started to do is blend the two. We've all been made to understand that you can't be who you are at work. So when you play pretend at work, right, to be somebody else, you're kind of denying who you are and what you bring to the table and all those different kinds of things. So I've kind of worked to work on my whole person, and then with the discernment that comes with being whole, I know when to talk, when not to talk, what to say, how to say it, or who I'm speaking with, and how to, navigate the different situations. I think in becoming a more whole individual, I've developed a certain level of situational awareness that's helped me out in the workplace that probably would not have existed were I just focusing on, speaking in my earnest voice and making sure that my tie was tied all the way up to the top of my, shirt collar.
There's a test out there called Insights Discovery, and it's based on Carl Jung's theory of psychological types. When you take it, I took it a few years ago, it shows you what it calls your conscious persona and your less conscious persona. Your conscious persona reflects who you want to be and who you think you are, while your less conscious persona reflects your more instinctive self and how you may react to others or react to your surroundings in a more natural way. Where it got good was it also showed the difference between those two personas and how big that difference is. Meaning, and I'm paraphrasing, when you are aware of how you're showing up, maybe you have to give a big presentation or you have to give a big speech, maybe you have to deliver bad news. Do you show up very differently than your natural self? Or are you relatively the same person no matter the situation? I think we all at some point have adjusted ourselves to act differently, even if we don't fully realize it.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
You've shared recently through a couple different mediums some really deeply personal moments that have contributed to your transitions and moments where you've kind of been in that uncomfortable middle. Can you talk a little bit about them? And then why did you decide they were ready to be told in a more public manner?
So, to tell the abridged story, life's, I think, for most people, but it kind of compacted for me in the last 10 years. So 2014, my father's dementia began to present. We didn't know that it was presenting, but it began to present. So that was around November of 2014, January of 2015. My former wife decided that she wanted to go her own road and not be together anymore. And I tried to stay married, but ultimately I learned that you can't make anybody do what they don't want to do. So
Mm.
papers were filed in April, May, I believe, of 2015. Then May of 2015, my son came back from college, his sophomore year of college, and he was asked not to come back for poor academic performance. He wasn't partying excessively. He wasn't doing anything beyond what any college kid does. He just wasn't doing well in school. And then divorce went through a month after that. Then July, I moved out from a four-bedroom townhome into a one-bedroom apartment, which was against my religion based on I grew up in a house. I owned a co-op in New York. I just, it was a backward step for me that I took very, very personally and very, very hard. September of that year, I guess the easiest way to describe it is that I got a promotion at work and went and got a nice turbocharged Audi, and it was considered my angry mobile, but it was my divorce mobile, as most people called it. I just called myself upgrading, but in retrospect, it definitely was my divorce mobile. And then 30 days after that, or almost 30 days after that, actually the day before, I think it was either around my birthday or the day before my birthday, I got laid off. And in my head, I kind of said, well, I mean, at the very least, I can sleep on my leather seats if I have to. So I got laid off. And then I spent about a year unemployed. And then there's more that happened after that. But that experience is what moved me into deciding I needed to do better, do more, have a better life, because I had allowed my identity to be shaped around the job that I had, the person I was with, even my kids, my kids and what they were doing and all that kind of stuff. And I was the dad, the quote unquote ringleader, circus master of all of it. But then when it was taken away and it took on different forms, I didn't really have anything to fall back on. And I made the long, arduous task to do better by myself. Part and parcel with doing better by myself, I guess, was acceptance, right? And the only way that you can accept your reality, which I think a lot of people, myself included, don't do, is you got to talk about it, right?
Mhm.
And what I've learned over time, because I've been a writer from a very young age, is that the more I talk about things, the more I share things, the less power they have over me.
Mm.
And honestly, there's a quirk inside of me that, that whole that adage, there's no shame in my game. I mean, like, seriously, I don't care. Like, once I've shared it, it's over with for me. So judge me, think about me, talk about me, whatever way you want. But once it's come out of my mouth or come off of, onto a sheet of paper or an electronic screen, it no longer holds any power. So it's kind of a weird symbiotic relationship that I have with sharing, because sharing allows me to get over it. And I don't really pay attention to the comments. I don't get bad comments, but I don't pay attention to the comments.
Yeah.
And one last part to answer your question, fully answer your question. I was a dad blogger back in the day, so I had been primed to share
Mm.
because of those experiences. So as we move from blogging to full out social media, it kind of was just micro blogging for me, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm curious, in all of that transition, when it came to finding your own voice, what surprised you the most?
I think what surprised me the most was how long I had disliked myself, how that was allowing me to accept whatever was being given to me. And also, I wasn't wanting anything. I didn't want anything. So, the question, a lot of people, especially when those kind of things happen, people say, well, Eric, or, well, Megan, what do you want? What do you want right now? If there's one thing you can have, what do you want? And I was like, I don't know. You know what I mean? I didn't know. I had no, I like, I drew a complete and utter blank, which kind of left me in a space of being stuck to my past and memorializing things that were no good for me instead of moving forward. So I said it was two things, right? One, I didn't like myself. And then two, I think the thing that I learned the most was what I was most afraid of. I thought initially that with all of that transition, that I was afraid that I could not continue, like live,
Hmm.
function, move forward, that kind of stuff. As I began to inevitably and, you know, like I had no choice but to proceed, what I really learned was my fear was that I could, because I was afraid that if I could, then it meant that everything that I had been doing up until then had been a waste of time. But with time and age and wisdom, I learned that those things weren't for naught. They just led me to the next steps where I needed to be. That's all.
It's so funny you say that because I hear a lot of people, myself included, having gone through work transitions and life transitions. You and I chatted before this recording. I am also divorced. It was almost that fear of succeeding. It sounds so counterintuitive. You would think, when you're at the bottom, when you're in the arena, success would be great, but it was almost there's that fear of what if I do make it? I think there's a very common experience there. What emotions did any emotions stand out? And what have you carried with you as you kind of went through some of those transitions and started to be on the other side of them? Or were you kind of, ready to just look forward?
So it's funny because I've written about this a lot on Substack, and I actually do a trauma and grief. I co-facilitate a trauma and grief workshop at my church, and I talk about this. I was very angry. Like when you come out of these things and you start to have some sort of self-awareness, I looked back and I was very angry. I was very angry that I had allowed the things that had happened to happen. I was probably angry for about 18 months straight.
Mm-hmm.
And so angry with myself. I was angry about the past. I didn't regret the past, but I was angry about the past. And I think it wasn't helping me to move forward. So I had to learn how to forgive myself, right? So that I could actually move forward. And then I had to embrace the idea that I did the best that I could with what I was working with. I'm also kind of big on, I'll call it time travel. Um, so time travel does actually exist. It really does. Like we're all time travelers. We are. What the movies have done for us is have us thinking that time travel is instantaneous, should be instantaneous. But we're all time travelers because if we're blessed enough to be here from last year, we've traveled through time. It's really that simple. You know what I mean? If you're, if you think about GPS, right, and you're taking a road trip and it tells you when you're gonna arrive, the minutes start counting backwards to when you're gonna get there, depending on which app you're using, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's predicting that at this time you'll be somewhere, right? So I've had to develop love for all the previous versions of me because they gave rise to this version of me that was waiting for me to show up. And I wouldn't have been able to be here talking to you right now had not all those other versions of me gone through whatever. I mean, it's not, I call myself Eric. Well, now it's 8.0. It used to be 7.0, but now it's 8.0.
I love that though. We can't be expected to be the same person. We're going to be multiple versions of ourselves throughout our lives. And I think there's a real, I don't want to say power because I feel like sometimes that gets overused a little bit, but there is a strength that comes from understanding all the previous versions of yourself and then how that shapes what you're going to be on your next journey.
I tell this story about how if I had gone back in time to high school, because that's probably the version of me that I had the most contempt for, right? That I would like poof into my hallway at my Catholic high school in Chicago and locker stuff myself and wait for me to get my books to go home. and then attack me. Like as soon as like school was over, and literally beat me like unconscious and don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And this guy would be like, "Well, where's our hair? Like, what happened? Like when I was like, oh wow, we've got muscles now, and oh, you are able to grow facial hair. Oh, that's cool." But what I say is that if that guy took all my advice, I would literally disappear, never to be seen or heard of again. Like this version of me would not exist because that version of me, if he listened, would have gone on in a different course, a different direction, and I wouldn't be here now. So
I think probably there's a part of all of us that want to go back and strangle our high school selves. I have some questionable fashion choices, if nothing else, that I did between freshman and senior year.
right, right.
How have your personal experiences shaped how you approach your work? And you are such a fascinating storyteller. How has it changed how you view and tell stories?
That's a great question because in the midst of this transition that I just described, I since got roles. And one of the things that I think it's done is it's grounded me, right, in ways that I didn't anticipate. I think that showing up as your whole self at work is good. I think authentically, I'm a lot less concerned about what people think about me. And I'm also a lot more willing to help others in need so that they don't experience some of the things that I've gone through. I mean, that's part of my dad thing as well, because I am a dad,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's just made me an overall more helpful employee, helpful leader in the workplace. It's giving me a lot of soft skills that aren't on job descriptions.
I love that. It really does. It gives you the skills you need to succeed in any role. How do you think about success? Do you think about it differently now than you did 5 years ago or even before getting a divorce and being laid off?
Yeah, I think for me, success was very titled and salary based.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think, how it would have like contributed to my pedigree. I just did air quotes pedigree. But I think now success is my own personal fulfillment, right? The money will come, the money will go. But you can't put a price on peace. You just can't put a price on peace. You can't put a price on living the life that you desire to live. And I think for me, success is living life on my own terms as my authentic self.
What are some of those terms?
Well, doing what I want to do, because I think in this world, get in where you fit in. That can sometimes get translated into just doing whatever to get by. And I just don't think that we're here to do that. I think that, I don't think that everyone is a creator or has a creative spirit in them. I don't think that. That's why there's creators who create, and then there's the audiences that consume the content, right? But I do think that we're all gifted with something. I think most of us spend our days watching athletes or listening to musicians and all the rest of that, and then tell ourselves that we can't do that. That's just them. But the only reason they're doing that is because they didn't listen to anybody that was saying that to them. Because if you talk to them long enough, they did have naysayers too. They just ignored them and consistently practiced their craft until they got to where they needed to be. I mean, of course, some people have more opportunities than others and all the rest of that. So that's a whole nother conversation for some other time. But I think that there's a certain thing that those individuals have where they just push through the negative talk, mostly that they tell themselves.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I saw something recently that says so much of us think in order to be who we want to be, we first have to do something to have something, and then we can go be. So if I want to be successful, I first have to get a job and I have to make a lot of money, and then I can be the person that I want to be because I'll have money or I'll have whatever I wanted. But it's actually the opposite. You have to start with who you want to be and who you are. And then you have to go do the things that will allow you to be that person.
To that point, not perfect and definitely need reminders. I have a friend who gets on me from time to time when I talk like that, and she says, you already are. There's nothing that you need to do. You already are. So just step into it. And then on a more funnier storytelling note, I used to work at Coca-Cola, and when I got laid off, well, no, I didn't get laid off from Coca-Cola. Our contract ended, and I mentioned I'm a dad blogger. I was a dad blogger, so I went on a media trip with a PR firm to the Bahamas, Bahamas tourism. A bunch of us out there, and I just blogged about it and wrote about it and so on and so forth. So I'm speaking to the guy who runs the PR firm. He's like, "Well, what do you want to go into? What do you this? All these different things." And he said, "And how much money do you want to make?" So at the time, I said, $50,000. It was whatever, it doesn't matter. But I said $50,000. Anyway, we land in Miami, and before we split to go into our different terminals, he said, "Listen, I've been listening to you all weekend talk about what you want to do or what you feel like you think you can do, and you literally have done all of that. And you gave me this number that I cannot tell anybody who would take me seriously or you seriously." He says, "So I need you to go home, think about a real number, and then get back to me." And then he turned with his suitcase and walked away. He didn't say bye. He just walked away and left me standing in the terminal. And I was like, okay. So just to illustrate, you're right.
As we start to wrap up, I have two remaining questions. First off,
Sure.
what advice do you have for leaders who may have employees, or I'll say even just friends, who maybe they're not going through their own transition, especially when it's personal, but they know someone, their employee is going through it or their friend is going through it? What advice do you have for them based on your experience?
I mean, it's definitely a balancing act, but you have to lead with compassion, right? And I think you have to understand that your people are your greatest asset, not what they do, but who they are. That's the greatest asset. And, I mentioned earlier about, the soft skills or what have you. I think that in the roles that I've had, that's what mattered more than my production because I'm going to produce no matter what, and you can hire somebody to produce no matter what. But if you're caring about your employees and you're making them feel good and giving them a reason to come to work, not just to socialize, but giving them a reason to come to work, then they're gonna show up better. You don't have to spend so much time convincing them to do what needs to be done because they're sold on it. I didn't mention it earlier, but like last year, my eldest son, he passed away in his sleep at the beginning of January. And it was probably the hardest thing I've ever been through, like period. And it hardened me in the idea that not too much phases me. But I think what ended up happening at the place where I was at, they went through a couple of rounds of layoffs. And from a layoff perspective, it's a part of life. But I think the way in which they conducted themselves was very undignified in considering what I had experienced and considering that although I took off to deal with that tragedy, I was still working through. And what I learned on the reverse end was that throughout my time there, I had shown them more dignity in the moments that mattered than they had shown me. And, got mad about it for a second, called up my employment attorneys, and they were all like, keep your money, because whatever money I get for you, you're going to give to me. So, so don't worry about it. Just take the licking and keep on ticking. So I would just say, it's kind of corny, it's kind of cliche, but be a good human.
I don't think it's cliche. And again, when you and I chatted, the reason your stories just have resonated with me over the past several weeks is I also lost my son about 10 years ago, which I don't talk about too much, but I have always said that one of the things that made that just horrendous, confusing time a little better was I had an incredible manager who she had not experienced anything like that of her own, but her ability to step into my shoes to the best that she could and say, I think this is what you need. And she also wasn't afraid to get it wrong. She would always say, like, I might not get it right, but just let me know and I'll try again. There are good leaders and bad leaders, and I think those good leaders and bad leaders shine through in those moments.
I think when they got it wrong, because they were definitely considerate, but when they got it wrong, they stood on that, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like they stood on where they were wrong, like versus what you just described. I think that's where, when something like that happens, not much else matters.
Mm-hmm.
So, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I wasn't I wasn't particularly fazed by anything that they were saying. I'm now speaking, in hindsight, and I'm speaking, with the ability to reflect and say, well, that could have been done a little bit different. But in the meantime, I'm like, okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah. What advice do you have for those that are going through their own transition and just trying to figure out what is next?
So, you and I have shared, our experiences, and they're similar and dramatic and tragic at times and so on and so forth, and we're still here. What I would say is, but everybody has their own version, right? And I mean, there were some, for example, COVID was terrible for a lot of people, especially people that were home alone. I had my daughter here, and I was terrorizing her, trying to have fun and all the rest of that. But I'm saying, like, a lot of people literally just developed a whole host of problems because of how isolated they were. So anyway, the middle is, the reason I brought that up is that I'd say the middle is that isolation, right? The middle is when you're on the road to somewhere and then don't know why you started, don't know how you got where you are, and don't know how to finish, right? And I think that in those moments, you have to remember your why. And that would probably work by writing it down when you first embark on your journey, right? So that's one piece of advice. Write down your why, or remember to revisit that. And then I think you have to give yourself grace. Like, you have to constantly give yourself grace. I am a high performing individual, and if I'm not showing up at 200, 300%, I'm thinking that something's wrong. The people that are around me that will say, Eric, your 30% is most people's 100%. So give yourself a break. And then, so I'll say this, if all you got is 30%, just give 100% of your 30%, each day. Whatever it is you have, just show up with as much as you can. Like, don't focus on the fact, oh, I'm only at 30% today. Just give 100% of your 30%. And then the thing about, as long as we're here, the thing about life is that each day comes after the next day. So you have a chance to try again. You have a chance to have an adventure all over again. Honor yourself by trying to be the best version of yourself. Forget other people, because other people become beneficiaries by you doing right by myself. One of the things that I say as a dad is that, I used to put my kids first, and the best thing I could have ever done for them when I was putting them first was put myself first. Because if I had put myself first, then I would have shown up I'm not saying I was bad. I think I'm a great dad, but I think I would have shown up as a better, they would have been able to experience more had I been putting myself first. So just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and don't worry about what it looks like. It's like going to the gym. You don't want to go to the gym skinny or overweight or whatever. But if you really want what you want, you can't worry about what it looks like. Some days are very ugly, and you just got to be ugly and be okay with that. Because it's all your story, and it's all about the tapestry that you get to tell somebody else, and hopefully tell somebody else or pass on to somebody else.
This has been incredible. I end every episode with a lightning round of questions. I'll be honest, it's one of my favorite parts. So I have a couple of fun lightning round questions if you are ready.
Sure. Go. Let's do it.
All right. First off, what was your first job?
Cutting grass.
Ooh. Did you have a push lawnmower going neighbor to neighbor?
I practiced on a push, but no, I had a gas mower.
Okay.
And definitely went neighbor to neighbor, and then ended up having the whole block. So it turned into quite the lucrative business.
You are probably, I'm not even kidding, maybe the 20th or 30th person I've just known in my life who said, yeah, as a kid, I had a lawn mowing, landscaping business, and it ends up being bringing in decent money for, a kid.
Yeah. Yep.
What is a lesson that took you a long time to learn?
That I have the right to want what I want. I think I grew up in a very Bible thumping household, and not getting your way was, oh, God's way or something. And I don't necessarily agree with that at all. I think, closed mouths don't get fed, and you got to work for what you want.
What was your last Google search?
Stretch lab.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
what person never fails to cheer you up?
Yeah, I have a friend named Rochelle. We were in a spin class together, and no matter what, if whenever something is askew, or even if everything is fine, we're laughing like 5 minutes into talking.
That's impressive for a spin class.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know how we ended up being friends outside of class. I mean, it was weird. I think when spin really took off, everybody kind of became very cultish and tribish around their spin classes, and we were one of those groups.
I've been there. What is the
Yeah.
best Halloween costume you've ever done?
Clark Kent. I was Clark Kent. That was
Oh,
my favorite.
with the
But I was
suit,
Clark
with
Kent
the suit
on a
and
shirt.
the yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I no, actually, I'm sorry. That's not my best. That's one of them. Can I say two?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
give two.
Okay, so since I already committed Clark Kent, yeah. So I had a Under Armour Superman shirt, and it was open. My tie was half untied, and I was wearing a pair of my glasses, and I just was in disarray. But like, in Superman time, no one would have ever seen that. But I was, halfway there. Um, my actual my actual favorite is, I completely forgot about it. I taped a puck light to my chest, and with some duct tape, I think it was a little painful getting it off afterwards, but put on a t-shirt, turned it on, and carried my Iron Man helmet, and the light went through the shirt. I can send it to you at one point. But anyway, yeah, I looked like and I'm carrying the helmet. I'm just walking around with the helmet with the light. So yeah.
I love it. I'm not going to tell my 8-year-old son about that at all because he will immediately want that for Halloween.
Right, right, right.
What is your favorite city in the U.S.?
New York.
Manhattan, or is there a specific borough? Or all of it?
I'd say all of it. All of it. Yeah.
What's for dinner tonight?
I'm thinking about making kind of like a burrito bowl, but I just got a brand new Japanese knife, and the ones that like cut through everything. So, it's like 85 hardened steel, and I bought it, and it literally shredded a tomato like the tomato was made out of butter. It's the scariest thing I've ever experienced. So, I'm looking forward to making. I have fajita meat, and I want to use the knife to chop it up. So I'm gonna probably make like burrito bowls for dinner.
I love when you get a new knife like that. It's like one of those adult things you
Oh
don't appreciate, so you get, and you're just like,
yeah.
man.
Yeah, and it came in its own individual box, and it's got all the padding inside of it. And my daughter saw me fawning over it the other day, and like it completely ignored me. She couldn't embrace the moment the way I was embracing the moment.
um, are you an early bird or a night owl?
I'm a little bit of both. Productivity wise, I'm an early bird, and just staying up to watch TV, I'm a night owl. But I mean, I'm an early bird, which is to the chagrin of everybody that's ever lived with me, especially the people I've birthed. Because by 10 a.m., I've done half a day's worth of work, and people are like talking about what's for breakfast.
And my last question is, what is the best compliment
Sure.
you've ever received?
You're a genius, and you have a big, beautiful brain.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I still haven't really. I'm still struggling to accept it, but I've heard it now more than once. So clearly, it must not be hooey.
It must be true. I would concur with it, having
Yeah.
getting to know you these last few weeks. As we wrap, Eric, where can people find you?
So I am on LinkedIn. If you put in Eric Payne, in, you'll see this like bald head guy smiling, sitting on a set of stairs. That's me, right? But I think my actual handle is EL Payne. I'm also on Substack. If you look up the Bounce Back, that's my newsletter on Substack. I am on Instagram as Eric Leon Payne. My middle name is Leon. I hated it all my life, but when my dad and I share the same middle name, because he didn't want to junior me, so he gave me the same middle name. And then after he passed, I actually added the Leon back into. I mean, I didn't take it out, but I started writing it out as Leon. So I'm on Instagram as Eric Leon Payne, and I have a podcast that it's not new, but you can always listen to it because it's a storytelling podcast. So it's called The Dating After Divorce Survival Guide. And that's just kind of like I won't say sex, I'll say it's like a hybrid Sex in the City, insecure, 40-plus-year-old man. I'm no longer 40 plus, but 40-plus-year-old man, like getting spat out into the world of the internet and internet dating versus, after a 15-year relationship and just some of the things that you experience along the way.
I can have you back to talk just about, yes, dating in your 40s after a long-term relationship ends. Because, yes, it is a whole new experience for anyone out there that's just getting into it. Just be prepared.
Yeah, for sure.
Eric, I appreciate you coming on. You write so eloquently about the real challenges we all inevitably face as humans and what it's really like to just, like you said, put one foot in front of the other and just make it to the other side. I don't think people have to have gone through what we both have gone through to learn from your writings. So thank you for taking time to share your perspectives and for being here today. Thanks for listening to The Middle. If today's story resonated with you, drop a subscribe, share the episode, and let's keep these conversations going. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over. You're just in the middle.